All right, listeners, I think you know that we are part of the Radiotopia network, which is basically a network built on the idea that you should support the most creative, independent audio makers around. No one, and I mean no one, embodies the Radiotopia ethos more than Benjamin Walker and his show Theory of Everything. Benjamin, who I've known for a long time, has been making beautiful, personal, sprawling audio documentaries for decades that help us understand the very strange world we live in. And now he has a new series called Not All Propaganda is Art. The new series goes back to the 1950s when Western security agencies like the CIA paid artists, writers, and intellectuals to fight the cultural Cold War.
The CIA funds were free. I mean, no one was told what to say.
Gloria Steinem, activist who sees the CIA as a sort of enlightened pal or rich uncle, there is another viewpoint.
Look, if you're listening to this show, I know you like secret histories. I know you like a mix of culture and politics and shadowy figures. So what are you waiting for? Not All Propaganda is Art from Benjamin Walker. You can find it now wherever you listen or at theoryofeverythingpodcast.com. This day is brought to you by Progressive. Are you driving your car or doing laundry right now? Podcasts go best when they're bundled with another activity. Kind of like Progressive home and auto policies. They're best when bundled too. Having those two policies together makes insurance easier and could help you save. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save nearly $800 on average. Quote a home and car bundle today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $793 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, December 14th, in 2008, at a news conference in Baghdad, Iraq, an Iraqi journalist threw his shoes at President George W. Bush. That's it. That's the intro. Okay. Most of you probably see that in your heads right now because I think anyone who's following politics or had access to the internet in late 2008 is probably able to picture it. A small press conference room. Bush is wrapping up his remarks. Someone about 4 rows back starts yelling, stands up, whips one shoe at Bush, then another. And I do want to say right off the bat, to his credit, he ducks and dodges and weaves and does sort of duck those shoes in a fairly agile, impressive fashion. You know, former athlete George W. Bush did a good job. Could you?
Do you think you could avoid the shoe, Jody?
That's the key question here.
The key question is, where's the Secret Service?
Well, that one too. Okay. There's a lot of key questions here. To get into them are, as always, Nicole Heimer of Columbia and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
That shoe was coming fast. Could you have, from not that far away, do you think you could have ducked it? Twice. That's the thing. To me, it's the duck, recovery, duck again. That is
He would have got
impressive.
me on the second pass. He would have got me.
Yep. The follow-up shoe would have been the one that did me in as well.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, this has been on the list since day one. This is truly one of those moments. This sort of lodges in your brain. Lots of silliness and weirdness and sort of interesting rabbit holes to go down. The larger context, of course, is, the Iraq War, which was Bush's doing, and a press conference. Obviously, at this point, Bush was leaving office. Obama had won. Obama had run on the fact that the Iraq War was largely a disaster. I think many people here, and certainly in Iraq, felt that it was. Bush goes to Baghdad, and I remember at the time just being like, the audacity of this is something.
Mm-hmm.
Goes to Baghdad, gives a press conference where, I wouldn't say he's trying to rewrite history and say, oh, this was actually a success, but he is certainly trying to wrap up his legacy, let's put it that way, by giving a joint press conference in Iraq.
At a point at which his approval ratings in the U.S. had bottomed out, right? There was a global financial crisis underway at the moment.
Yep.
The U.S. had turned its attention away from Iraq and towards Afghanistan, and yet there was still a large troop presence there, and the war had just gone so badly. I mean, at this point, we're a couple of years out from the photographs of Abu Ghraib, the knowledge of the torture that's gone on, the hundreds of thousands, if not million civilians killed in Iraq. And so you have somebody who is watching this, an Iraqi journalist, Muntadhar al-Zaidi, who is listening to George W. Bush at this moment. Everything didn't go perfectly, but here are all of the good things that we have brought to Iraq since the invasion. And honestly, Bush is lucky that a shoe was the only thing that was thrown at him, because you can imagine all of the rage someone would feel sitting in that room from the Iraqi perspective.
Oh, yeah. And al-Zaidi pretty much talks about, like, almost going blind with rage. Like, all he saw was Bush, and all he could think of was the destruction, the millions of lives lost, the mosques destroyed, people's lives who were just completely ruined. And here comes along Bush trying to put a bow on it, trying to, I don't know, have some sort of consolation prize, and he was not buying any of it, and he sort of loses his mind in the middle of that. He takes off a shoe and throws it at his head.
Yeah, and by all accounts, al-Zaidi was just moved in the moment. This was not premeditated, and you know, he was a journalist there. I think there's some interesting stuff to say here about kind of journalism and sort of the way that, and whether you should have, the passions that can enter even into a journalist, but we can get to that. But, again, I think so much of this, as it was portrayed here, and it's absurd and ridiculous and over the top, and there's so many, tidbits, but I think the larger context is so important that this was an act of rage and like, a cry in some sense. And what Zaidi yells as he rises up and throws the shoe is, he says, "This is a farewell kiss from the Iraqi people, dog." He yells that in Arabic as he throws his first shoe.
And I think that's really important, both the insult dog and the throwing of the shoes, because it means something specific in Arabic culture, right? The shoe is a supreme insult to show the sole of your shoe to someone, much less throw a shoe at someone, because it's the thing that makes contact with the ground. And dog, too, is a specific insult in Arabic culture, which suggests, again, like that you're low down, that you're unclean. Yes. And so there's something deeply cultural about what seems very funny to Americans to throw a shoe, but that has this very specific meaning.
No, they're deep. That's a deep insult. It's not superficial. It's not, you jerk. This is much more than that.
Right. I will say there was a little bit of like a interesting pushback where, like the New York Times would write it up and be like, well, in Iraq, throwing your shoe at someone is a sign of disrespect. It's like, well, I would say most places throwing your shoe at someone is probably, it's not a sign of respect. But
in New York, throwing your shoe at someone.
That's how we say hello.
Like, it's not like if this was in some other country, they'd be like, oh, thank you. Size
Thanks
10
for the free shoe.
But yes, I think certainly the cultural context here, and there is a long Wikipedia page of the history of shoe throwing incidents. It is something, that people have done from time to time. And yes, the showing your souls. An interesting tidbit is that Saddam Hussein had a mosaic of the elder Bush at the entrance of Baghdad's Rashid Hotel, so that visitors would step on that likeness as they entered the hotel as a sort of sign of insult. So yes, I think the shoe is not a coincidence here.
Right, and shoes had been attached to pictures of Saddam Hussein and thrown at his statue when it was being toppled. So I think an important thing to draw out here is that it is not that these were people who were opposed to Saddam Hussein being deposed. Millions of Iraqis had suffered under the Hussein regime, but they had not asked for this lengthy, deadly invasion from the United States. And so for many Iraqis, it's they're using the same insult against Bush as they did Hussein.
So let's jump to the U.S. reaction, and then we'll go back and talk about how the fallout in Iraq. But, in the U.S., no surprise, this is fodder. The internet is in an interesting place in 2008. The Daily Show is still going very strong. The Daily Show probably played this like 7 times a night for 3 straight months or something. But it's a sensation.
Oh yeah. It was easy to make fun of, but it was also enjoyable to make fun of too, because I think people were just like, oh, so we're not the only ones that are pissed. To be like in solidarity in that moment with just like the throwing of the shoe, I think was so wild.
And his life wasn't in danger, right? I think that it might have been different had it been a knife attack or a gunshot.
sure.
But this was a shoe being thrown at him. So there was something absurd about it. And even his ability to duck it, right? Like, he looked ridiculous. And that's why it played in such comedic ways in the U.S.
Yeah.
And it would have been different if it was, spit too. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's something gross about bodily fluid. There's something violent about a knife or a gun. But a shoe, sort of that middle of the road where it's like, we are trying to insult you, maybe harm a little bit, but not like hurt. We want to send a message that what you have done is violent in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like the cyclist who flipped off the Trump motorcade.
Yeah. And I mean, as an act of political theater, right, which I think is a long legacy of in around the world, it sort of fits right in. Zaidi is tackled to the ground. Al-Zaidi is tackled to the ground and inside the room. No surprise. Everyone's like befuddled and sort of figuring out there's chaos in the moment. He's arrested. The shoes are confiscated and detonated. They're worried that there are explosives inside the shoes or something. I guess we're still living in the shoe bomber era.
We are.
Unnecessary and excessive.
So can I at least have my shoes back?
Which is too bad, because those shoes were something that people really wanted to get their hands on afterwards.
I would imagine, and al-Zaidi becomes a bit of a folk hero in Iraq, though there is, split opinion about whether this crossed the line, but there are thousands of people who take to the streets calling for his release. There's questions about whether this was, sort of dishonoring a guest, regardless of your political beliefs, so forth. I think we're entering the just lots of fascinating tidbits to this story phase here. So I'll start with one. Yeah. The Turkish cobbler who made Zaidi's shoes got thousands and thousands of orders over the course of a single week in the aftermath of this. Everyone wanted the same pair of shoes that got hurled at George W. Bush. I love that.
And there was a real battle over authorship, too, of those shoes, because everyone wanted to claim to be the cobbler who made the shoes that got thrown at Bush.
Yeah.
What I think is the most incredible thing is the sculpture of the 8-foot-long copy of the shoes that was placed as a pedestal outside of a orphanage in Tikrit, with someone basically saying, when the next generation sees the shoe monument, they will ask their parents about it, and then their parents will start talking about the hero who threw his shoe at George W. Bush. And I'm like, that to me is everything. It's everything.
That the shoe gets its own statue is pretty great.
Yeah. And I just love, the idea that, like, sure, maybe at some age a kid would ask their parent, like, what's the deal with that shoe? And it'll spark a story. But there will be many, many more years where the kid is just confused. And it's just like, just like walks by it every day going to school. It's like, what the heck is this shoe? It's like, man, I live in a weird town. So, there is a criminal proceeding here in early 2009. There is a trial, and Zaidi tells the Central Criminal Court that he acted spontaneously because he heard Bush touting his achievements. In March of 2009, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for assaulting a foreign head of state during an official visit. He was released after 9 months. Released early. He had no prior criminal record, and he had good behavior during his arrest. And he then, in 2009, another fascinating tidbit here, al-Zaidi is speaking at a news conference in Paris, and an Iraqi man in the audience stands up, accuses him of supporting dictatorship, and flings a shoe at him. The flinger has become the flingy.
What goes around comes around. Those who throw shoes.
I tried to find video. I don't know if he was as agile in the ducking of the shoe, but I suppose you're asking for it. Is there anything to say? Maybe I'm overthinking. Is there anything to say about the fact that he was a journalist? I mean, I don't know. We have all these fraught conversations in this country about journalists showing opinions and so forth. And, I don't know. Does it matter?
I mean, I think that it is overwrought, even in the U.S. context, what objectivity is and what objectivity looks like. I'm not saying that journalists need to be throwing shoes, but if your country had been invaded and 1 million people killed, what does it mean to be objective in that moment when you're facing down the architect of that invasion? It just, I mean, sure, like there's a value in being able to ask questions in that moment, I suppose, but there is also a value in being a human being in that moment. So it's hard to fault him, especially given that this was more of an insult than an attack.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that is why so many people sort of rallied around him a bit, because it just felt like such a gut human response to rage, and something that, again, universally understood, right? No one is throwing shoes as like a high five, you know?
Yeah.
So...
This incident, I mean, it lives on in our hearts and our imaginations, but it also popped back up a little bit just because just a few years ago in 2018, Muntadhar al-Zaidi ran for the Iraqi Council of Representatives. I mean, I don't know internal Iraqi politics. To me, I feel like in this country, being the shoe-throwing guy would be a great leg up. You could win a Republican or Democratic primary just on that alone. But he doesn't. He doesn't get many votes. In the May election, he runs, but he does not get elected. So maybe they actually looked at his policies, unlike what we would do in this country.
Well, you can't build a platform around a shoe.
That's true. You could put a shoe on a platform like they did in Tikrit, but yes.
We should say that the woman who flipped off the Trump motorcade also ran for office.
Really?
And in this country, she won her seat.
There you go.
She won a seat in the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. So it can be a platform in the U.S. to insult a world leader.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Amazing.
That's crazy.
Amazing. One last tidbit, which I find wonderful, is that apparently there was a Maureen Dowd column that she wrote during the 2016 presidential election where she recounted watching George H.W. Bush see the rise of Trump. George H.W. Bush, I think, hated Trump and sort of hated the rise of Trump. And apparently, while watching CNN and seeing Trump, Bush took off his shoe and threw it at the TV, which I said a nice little homage. I don't know if that says something about the sort of father-son dynamic, but I just love it as a moment of real cross-cultural exchange, right? We have now brought that tradition to this country. And I think we should adopt it. And why not? Shoe throwing. Let's do it.
Oh, man.
Jody's platform for when he runs for office.
Yeah,
more shoe throwing.
Well, look, the chancla is like a huge legacy in this country. I mean, there is weaponized shoes is not totally outside of the norm of this country. So, yes.
We'll have to do a spin-off podcast on weaponized shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Some James Bond type stuff.
Right.
I still feel like there needs to be like a those who live in glass houses, like those who wear shoes.
Ooh.
Shouldn't those shoes?
Yeah,
I don't know what it would be, but
we'll get there.
Something.
We'll workshop it.
We'll workshop, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm really glad we did this one. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you as always.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So what if the guy threw a shoe at me?
Support for This Day in Esoteric Political History comes from Odoo. If you feel like you're wasting time and money with your current business software or just want to know what you could be missing, then you'll need to join the millions of others who have switched to Odoo. Odoo is the affordable, all-in-one management software with a library of fully integrated business applications that help you get more done in less time for a fraction of the price. To learn more, visit odoo.com/thisday. That's odoo.com/thisday. Odoo, modern management made simple.
Radiotopia.